Hey guys, this is Kevin Kane with Precision Powerlifting Systems. I'm joined by the easily distracted Jay Birdie of Jay Birdie Fitness. So today what I want to talk about is I want to talk about emotions and training. So if you look at our pyramid, dead smack in the bottom of the foundation, we have mindfulness. So mindfulness, it's having that self-awareness that our thoughts, our emotions, and actions are getting away from us at times. And we need to be able to pull them back in so that we can be in that present moment. Because the only place that you can actually get stronger is in the now, the present moment, right where your feet are. It's the only place that matters. It's the only place that exists, and it's the only place that you can get stronger. However, it becomes very challenging to remain in that position. Sports can really help teach mindfulness because it puts you into situations that are really going to challenge that skill set. But in order to challenge that skill set and actually improve upon it, because it can be improved upon, you, one, have to be put into situations that are going to challenge you to do it, and you have to be given the tools that are necessary in order to actually be able to do it. So oftentimes in this sport, I think what you see is you see lifters that they run programs and they're not really challenged to deal with their emotional pieces or to learn how to actually compete at a high level. They're not forced to do that in training. And then the first time that they encounter situations that really challenge their mindset, it's on a platform somewhere. And what you see is as the weights get heavier, it's a lot of ammonia, it's a lot of heavy music, it's a lot of pre-workout, it's all of these external substances that you're using to try to influence the internal environment and that internal dialogue. And at the end of the day, your internal dialogue is your confidence. So what people are doing is they're using those external substances to try to build their confidence so that they can perform difficult tasks. The human body has a way to set ourselves up to be able to perform at a high level. It's our fight or flight response. It's there for that reason. There's a survival benefit to it. So with a certain amount of arousal, what we get is we get increased blood flow, heart rate, all of our muscles, the blood flow is directed towards them. We no longer are focusing on digesting food. We're just focused on action. And we can utilize this physiological response to our physical performance. But our minds have to be in the right place to be able to control it. So I gave an example, I may have said it on this video, but on another video, but I gave this example in one of our team emails about the high performance Red Bull lab. What they did is they took 3 golfers, a PGA Tour pro, a local golf pro, and then a weekend warrior. And what they did is they put them in stressful situations. And the PGA Tour golfer, and what they did is they measured a whole bunch of physiological responses. So during these stressful situations, the PGA Tour golfer's heart rate got up to like 140 beats per minute. But as soon as he stood over the ball to putt, his heart rate dropped to 80 beats per minute. So he had this awareness of the current situation to control his physiology, to put him in a position where he could succeed at a higher level. And that's literally what they showed with this research study. And I'm going to kind of explain how we go about actually training that skill set. So this is the Yerkes-Dodson Law. This was created in 1908. Those are the 2 researchers, their last names. They're the ones who called it a law. It was really only cited like 10 times or something. So it's really not a law. It's more of just like a blueprint of how to set your mindset to accomplish difficult tasks or to perform at a high level. They literally called it a law, not really a law, but I appreciate their ego and that sense of effort. But so what this is it tells us that there's an optimal amount of arousal for performance. So if you're not aroused enough, you don't get those physiological benefits. You're just uninterested and not motivated to do something. So you're just not going to perform at a high level. That usually doesn't happen often with sport. It's usually the other way around. So when you get too much arousal, what you get is it's hard to concentrate and focus on a given task. It's really hard to keep your mind in that current moment because what ends up happening is it's what if I fail? What if I miss this? What if this happens? You start playing that game and then the physiology kind of controls you and you're not able to control it and to use it and harness it for higher levels of performance. And this is where choking takes place. The only way that you get better, so I used this quote on Instagram the other day and it comes from Dr. Michael Gervais, but he had said, you need to earn the right to do difficult. So it's not like you can just train in a program and not challenge yourselves and not challenge your mindset, not challenge your physical skills, and then expect to compete at a high level when you're challenging them for the first time. You can't be confident under those scenarios if you haven't trained those scenarios in the first place. So training has to offer you these circumstances that allow you to challenge your skill set slightly beyond that skill set frequently enough that when something gets hard, you can stand there and tell yourselves that I've earned the right to be able to do this difficult task because I have challenged myself through training. I've challenged my mindset, my physical skills, and I've combined them to the best of my ability, and I've given my best effort to be standing here to have this opportunity today. And I've earned the right at this point in time to be able to attack this task. And this comes with, it's a liberating feeling because you've earned the right to be disappointed. So if you go out and you miss the rep, it doesn't have the same negative effects that it typically would have if you hadn't challenged yourself before. Because I think what you see a lot of times, you see that lifter, they're huffing ammonia, playing their music because they're trying to change their inner dialogue. They're trying to change their nerves and everything else that's happening by using these external circumstances because they didn't develop that skill set. They're not honest with themselves. And then something bad happens and then they place blame somewhere else. And this becomes a very frustrating cyclical cycle. Can you say both of those words back to back?
Cyclical cycle.
Yeah, that's good, right? It becomes this cycle of that you can't get out of because you're not honest with yourself. You don't know what skills you actually need to be successful. And you're focusing on the wrong thing. So then you change programs, you change coaches, and it just becomes the same cycle again. This is where mindset starts, is you need to train it in the gym, number one, and you need to have circumstances that, get the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up at times, to put yourself into these circumstances, to train these skills, and you have to repeat it over and over. That repetition method has to come in for the psychological training of the sport as well. So if you're not doing this stuff, this is where you start before you start changing programs and stuff. So again, Yerkes-Dodson Law, not a law. They said it was a law. And there's the right amount of arousal that we need that can give us optimal performance. Too much, not good. Too little, not good, for different reasons. So where this optimal level lies is going to depend on the task. If you're doing laundry, it probably doesn't fucking matter, right? If you're trying to concentrate on learning something, like reading a textbook or something like that, the amount of arousal can probably be a little bit less, right? You're going to see this like sliding scale a little bit. For high level, so off the top of my head, the first example I can think of is like a 100-meter sprint, something that takes like under 10 seconds at the highest of levels, right? Where if they shift that scale up a little bit, that increased arousal might increase performance. And where we want to be in powerlifting, what we got to think about, if we're increasing that arousal, it comes with a higher recovery cost. So if our training's set up in a way that we're challenging ourselves every day in the gym, if you're attacking it with a higher and higher level of arousal, if you're on that other end of 5, that like 6, 7, 8 range to be able to do your max effort lifts or whatever you're doing, the recovery costs are going to end up accumulating to something substantial. So for powerlifting, in training especially, I think there's a time and a place. Like I know for me, if I'm in the gym and I'm doing a max effort lift and things feel heavy, I can get myself pissed off enough to muster something that's, maybe I put a weight on the bar and I'm like, man, if I get fucking pissed, I'll be able to hit this weight. And I can do that, but it needs to be repeatable and it needs to be stable. And performing at a level like that and using that type of arousal in order to increase performance, it has its places and it has its places where it's appropriate, but you got to call your shots with it. So what would happen for me in training is I would do that too often, and then recovery costs would become negatively affected. So what we want is we want a 5 out of 10. And what's interesting is like when I started learning about this, I started thinking about the Bulgarians. And so in the Bulgarian system, they weren't allowed to use caffeine. They weren't allowed to use ammonia caps or any type of psychological arousal. They had to remain calm in training. So this kind of applies to that same model of training for the heavier singles and stuff that they were doing much, much more frequently. So we want to find our 5. So we want to be a 5 out of 10. That way, what we're getting is we're getting the optimal amount of arousal that gets our physiology in a state that we can perform at our highest, but it's not overwhelming us to the point where we can't focus on the task, right? So it's setting our body up for the highest level of performance that we can possibly have. So we need to find our 5. what happens a lot of times, I think Jess, who's fallen asleep over there, is are you not aroused enough to be learning about this topic?
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. So I think what a lot of times what we get, right, is it's not like we wake up from a nap and then we stroll into the gym. So, you know, we have jobs, we're living in a pandemic. There's all kinds of things that are going on. And what this does is it probably on a baseline level of just living our lives creeps up our arousal, right? So just think of like circumstances that would create a level of anxiety within us that our baseline's a little bit higher than we would like, right? Stressful day at work, family stuff, traffic, whatever it may be, our baseline level of anxiety is probably already being recorded on this scale. And then we go into the gym and then we challenge ourselves, right? So effort, part of our pyramid, means that we challenge ourselves beyond our current skill set, slightly beyond it, so that we're always stretching and always striving to be a little bit better than we were yesterday. That's what effort is. Effort isn't just showing up and going through reps. It's challenging your skill set slightly beyond what you're capable of doing so that you can continue to progress and get better. So our training's really fucking hard. There are some weeks you have 3 max effort lifts. And it does. It can become overwhelming if you're not honest with yourself and you're not using these psychological tools, these mindset tools, to put yourself in the right headspace so you can perform at your highest level. But that's the point. The point of training is to have consequences that challenge your skill sets, but also sharpen your tools and give you more tools. So if we're coming to the gym and we're already at a higher arousal setting, and then you throw something difficult on top of it, we can very easily get into the 7-8 range without having to try too hard. We start getting nervous, we start worrying about what happens if we miss, what it means if we lift less this time than we did the last time. And that works in both directions too, right? Like we can get all, like I was saying, like me, I get all amped up and hit it, but that's not really repeatable and stable performance. And what we're looking for is repeatable and stable performance. So for me, because I have a meet coming up in 4 months, I'm doing max effort lifts every day. I'm going back to doing my singles. And then every week rotating between singles and rep work based off of that max effort lift. So very similar to what my group does, but I only train the 3 days. And I'm in gear, so the recovery cost of that, just even with my skin, with how much it beats me up and stuff, needs to be taken into consideration. So in order for me to be able to train as hard as I can, to accumulate the most quality hard training sessions I can accumulate, I need to do a better job of finding my 5. I can't be in the 7-8 to muster something out. On the other end of the spectrum, let's call this other person Jay Birdie. When she gets up into the 7-8 range, what happens is she may become overwhelmed, where she can't focus on the things she needs to focus on to be able to execute the task. The task itself just becomes overwhelming. So this is where challenge versus threat and the mindset of the two of them come into play. So what we want to do, like I was saying, effort means that we challenge our skill set slightly beyond our current capabilities. But if we're challenging ourselves too much or we get overwhelmed, we now feel threatened. And when we feel threatened, our response, for a lot of people, we have fight, flight, freeze, and submit. So a lot of those are running away. There's only one that actually, like, somebody might get geared up and be able to really hit something and execute at a high level at that period of time. But remember the recovery cost. If we do that, yeah, great, we get that single day in the gym that goes really well, but we're not able to stack those days because at some point our physiology needs a break. So you can't just go into the dark places inside your soul somewhere and just bang out PRs all the time, because there is a huge cost associated with that. So if we become overwhelmed and we can't focus on the task at hand, this is where, like, squatting high, miss grooves, and there comes with a high recovery cost of all of this too, but this is where mistakes happen. This is where choking happens, is when it becomes overwhelming. So I need to do a better job, and so does everybody else, of finding the 5. So the number one thing that we need in the beginning of all of this is self-awareness. We need to know when our arousal is too low or when our arousal starts to get too high. So if we don't have that self-awareness and that mindfulness of knowing where we are at that current point in time, we're not going to be able to pull ourselves back to that optimal level in order to have our optimal level of performance, that optimal amount of arousal. So number one, we need to train that mindfulness and that awareness of those situations. When we're too low, when we don't have enough arousal, this is where like lack of interest, lack of motivation and stuff comes in. We need to find a way to pull ourselves up, to get ourselves more aroused, to get ourselves more towards that 5. And what this can be sometimes is putting the right weight on the bar, challenging yourself in the right way that forces you to do it, that you know that if you don't get a little excited for this and find a way to get a little motivated, and I'm not using motivation as like, yeah, I can't wait to do this, just like that general feeling of, I feel challenged and I want to do this because I feel challenged. So you can put the right weight on the bar to do that and like figure out a way. A lot of times this comes down to recovery cost. Have you just really just like crapped out your mindset because you're so stressed out in other places? Which then means you need to take that self-awareness. And this is really important too. Self-awareness doesn't just need to happen in the gym. It needs to happen all of the time so that you have enough. One, it helps train the skill more because you're getting more repetitions. But you need to have enough psychological power left to be able to control it while you're trying to do something that's difficult in a high duress environment, right? So like putting a max effort lift on a bar is a highly stressful situation that you want to be able to own, and you want to challenge yourself and you want to execute and do all of those things. So there has to be resources to do that. So hydration, nutrition, sleep. Without those baseline things, you're going to really struggle with this. I don't typically see that being a problem, because with max effort stuff, it usually gets some type of feelings flowing. What ends up happening is you usually go to the other end of the spectrum. So if you have somebody who suffers from anxiety or something, right, if there's some underlying issues there, they live life a little bit more aroused, right? And anxiety it's really nothing more than future predicted outcomes, right? You're literally not living in the now. You're not where your feet are. You're worried that this is going to be the result of something in the future, and you just constantly get that worry about what's happening somewhere else. So developing that skill to come back. And this is easy to do in work. Maybe you sent an email or received an email or something that pulls you into, oh man, tomorrow's going to suck because my boss wants to talk to me, or whatever it is. It makes it hard. You got to come back to the current moment. So at all times, you need to be able to be aware of this and to pull yourself back. And the easiest way to do this is with some type of breathing. And breathing's always there. So it's something that you can always count on. A really good, like, fill your belly, fill your chest, take in a little bit more, like where that tension is, literally just top it off a little bit more so it's a lot more uncomfortable. And then a long exhale and just pause for a second. So when your body's not getting oxygen under those situations, that's where like the mind will start having anxiety. If you can just literally just hang out in that pause for a period of time, and then just do anywhere between, 3 to 10 breaths of doing something like that to really like pull yourself back down, to really help that anxiety, to get the mind back in the present, because breathing's happening in the current moment. It's happening right now. And it's never going away. So you can always use it to your power to pull yourself back in. And then confidence is nothing more than positive self-talk. But it's going to be positive self-talk that you fucking believe. This is why it's so important to challenge yourself so that you can earn the right to do something difficult. Is because if you tell yourself, yeah, I'm a fucking beast, and you're in this situation and you've literally backed down from every challenge you've had in the last 6 months, doesn't matter what you fucking say, you're missing that rep. Am I right? So you need to have this positive self-talk with yourself. So like, for me, sometimes it's like, all right, well, it's time to compete. I've earned the right to do this. I've earned this opportunity. And these are things I've said to the team over the past, like some of the positive self-talk that I tell myself. So like, really, I got this is like a really simple one, but you got to believe it. And you got to know you're challenging yourself just slightly outside your skill set. Because if you're challenging yourself way outside your skill set, if you're not honest with yourself, and you're like, I can definitely hit this weight because 6 months ago I hit this weight and I want to hit a PR, right? Wanting and being present in the moment and knowing what's the right decision to make on the bar are two entirely different things. So you might be stretching yourself a little bit, and your mind fucking knows. So if you're trying to tell yourself you got this when you know you really don't, like when your mind really knows, you're not going to be able to pull yourself back down. You can lie to everybody else, but you can't lie to yourself. So it's really important to know that situation. And I think what ends up happening a lot of times is we get up into this area, and what people do, they'll take an out. So it's like, oh, I'm not going to put this weight on the bar because I'm tired. I need to recover. I need to do these things. You need to challenge yourself. And you need to challenge yourself outside of your skill set. But of course, the recovery costs of all those things. And there's an appropriate time to pull back. But you got to know when that appropriate time is. And what you got to do is, if you've really developed this, like I know for me, I can pull myself down to the 5. I can feel my heart racing, and it's not like that beating in your chest goes away or the sweating goes away or any of that. Like that stuff still happens. So I know that PGA Tour golfer that I said was able to decrease his beats per minute. Like I don't feel that happen. And I know other high level athletes have said similar things, that they don't feel that happen. But it gets them excited and it gets them to want to compete. And it's like, yeah, something's about to fucking happen and I'm going to challenge myself right now. And I know I can fucking do this because I've earned the right to fucking do this by how hard I've worked previously. And for me, when I feel like that, it almost gives me this like sense of power, where if I'm lying to myself, if I know I haven't put myself in this situation, so if I put weight on a bar that I know is a bit of a stretch, you can't lie to yourself. Those words don't have the same power. So it takes some practice. But your breathing is always in the current moment. It is always in the now, and it is always there. It's the easiest thing to use. And how many breaths you need to take in order to pull yourself down is probably going to be very individualized. But it's one definite strategy that can help you achieve optimal performance. So this is where this is a baseline awareness and mindset training that's necessary to compete at a high level. Questions?
What about when you said, how like you like lie to yourself, but like your brain knows that, you might not have a rep, for instance? Or like, what if you are 50-50 before you're going into not just lifting, but any situation, and you think you might fail and your brain knows, but you want to do it anyways? Like how do you combat that?
So there's always risk of missing, right? No matter what. Like you could put any weight on a bar, there's always a risk you're going to miss the weight, right? Especially if you're challenging yourself. That's what challenging yourself means. It means you're going to miss sometimes, because nobody bats at 100%, right? So one, you're already assuming that risk that you can miss. So what do you tell yourself?
Like if you're not sure, but you want to hit it.
I mean, you always want to hit it, right?
Yeah, but yeah.
So it's being honest with yourself. I've earned the right to go out there and attempt this, right? Make or miss, it doesn't matter, right? You've put your best, if you know you've put your best effort forward, that you're capable of doing this and you believe you're capable of doing it, but it comes with some risk because you are challenging yourself, and every challenge has that risk. It has to. So like when you see these programs that have a single at 85% or RPE 7, whatever that turns out to be in that percentage chart, that's not challenging yourself. That's just viewing it from a physiological perspective of moving weight, right? To me, you're not training the mind to tell yourself that you're capable of doing more, because you just don't have to in that case there, right? You're not challenging your skill set. If we're doing a max effort lift, and let's say you did something, you hit 250 pounds on week 1, we did some reps, we did our good deliberate practice, we had those clear goals, we focused on them, we saw improvement in sets and reps. Week 3, you're a little tired because training's been hard, there was high volume the week before, you hit your accessory work hard. Week 3 comes up, you put 255 pounds on the bar, the weights are feeling kind of heavy, but you're like, you know what? It's time to fucking compete. I know I've put the work in. I know I had the dedicated focus and attention to detail last week. I know I'm tired, but I know I can fucking do this. I know I've earned the right to attempt this lift. And make or miss, I've succeeded in the block because I know that I'm putting a weight on the bar that is going to challenge me, but I've earned the right to take on this challenge, right? So saying the words of I've earned that right, and when you're not afraid to miss, I think like what you're saying, and this is where a lot of people get in their minds, it's that fear of failure is what ends up holding them back, because they don't want to miss, they want to hit it to show that they got stronger. But if you did everything right and you still miss it, who gives a shit? You're not losing anything out of that attempt. You're going to learn something from it and you're going to move on. But if you're putting it on there and you're trying to talk yourself up, but let's say week 1, it was a 10 and you tried to tell yourself it was a 9, right? That, oh, there's more here. I know I can do more because my best comp squat's 265, right? So then the next week you come in and you just, you think you have more. You're texting and you're on Instagram and you're on your Snap face taking bathroom selfies in between breaks because you like the way your hair looks on a given day.
Oh my God.
But let's say you're just kind of fucking around in the gym in week 2, and then you go in week 3 and you feel you deserve it because you've showed up every day. You deserve a 5-pound PR on that. Your body knows, your brain knows that you haven't done anything right. It knows how hard that week 1 lift was. It knows that you were fucking around week 2. And week 3, you haven't earned the right to be there. And so you're giving yourself an opportunity. And then when this happens, because you get people who aren't honest with themselves, it's, this program's not working for me. I need to do this, or this needs to change, or this. And there's always excuses, and it's never, you weren't honest with yourself. You weren't self-aware. You weren't focusing. You weren't doing the deliberate practice. You weren't doing the things you were supposed to. You didn't earn the right to take that weight. And it's a great equalizer at times because people think they've earned the right. You see this a lot too. It's like, well, my last meet I hit this, I want to hit this. So what they do is they squat higher. And then you'll see them hit these bigger squats and they're high and they'll go to a competition and then they'll blast on the internet. The judges don't know what they're talking about. It's like you squatted high in training the whole time. You weren't honest with yourself. You're telling yourself you earned the right to take that weight when you didn't. And when you did take it, you got exactly out of it what you put into it. It always works out that way. There has to be risk associated with it. But fear of failure can't hold you back. And it only holds you back when you know you didn't do everything you were supposed to before you attempted that weight. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Anything else? What do you do when you get a little scared?
With what?
So let's say, with lifting.
Okay.
So let's say there's a way, let's take a squat.
Okay.
And it's feeling really heavy. Let's say 2 plates goes on there. So Jess's best comp squat's 265, right? Uh-huh. So let's say we put 2 plates on there, it feels really heavy. Uh-huh. What do you tell yourself currently? What do you do in that situation when you start getting into the, oh fuck, this feels heavy. What if I miss this rep? Like you start getting into that negative mindset, but the heart's beating, you're sweating a little bit more, your confidence is shaking a little bit. What do you do to try to pull yourself back down?
Well, without realizing it, I do try to take, some, not even just because we've talked about this recently, but I take, some slow, deep breaths to relax my, parasympathetic nervous system.
It turns on your parasympathetic.
Yeah. So then to relax my
sympathetic
nervous, nervous system. So I'll do that. I'll put on a song that actually is slower tempo, so that it's not this like high rattle. Like if I start to get like shaky nervous, which I do, there's times where like I'm ready to get after it, and I'll put on something like crazy. You know what I mean, like music wise. But if I'm like getting that nervous where I'm already really aroused on like an 8 or a 9 or a 10, then I'll put on something slower. This isn't probably a good thing, but I'll try to distract myself for a moment by maybe chatting with like you or Mike or Lindsay for a second, just to not like to kind of get the shakes away. That's if I'm like really nervous, and that definitely happens to me sometimes too. Mainly because the weight has been feeling pretty heavy on my back, so I do understand this. But yeah, I just try, and then I kind of think like, if I die, I die.
I mean, I guess. I think the distraction is, there's a couple of things.
It's not a good thing, but it does help me.
It breaks the negative chain, at least, right?
I want to just think about something else for a second.
Yeah. So one was sympathetic and parasympathetic. So too little arousals, too much parasympathetic. Too much arousals, too much sympathetic, right? So there's got to be a balance, right? Like anything, there's got to be a balance. And music can be a nice equalizer. There are certain, I'm sure there's like certain types of music too that like have an effect on brain waves that would allow like for better focus and stuff like that. But you definitely, music can be a great distraction, which can be negative, but it can also be a nice benefit where good things can happen, right? Like you can, like you said, something that's a little lighter. And even then it gives you something else to focus on, right? So sometimes like those negative thoughts are just like banging around inside your brain and you put a song on and you just focus on the song for a minute, right? It can help kind of bring you back. And then it kind of can give you this moment of clarity and be like, okay, I got this. Especially if like the words of the song are a little bit more like, not aggressive, but like competitive in terms of like putting them together and comparing them to lifting and stuff. And when arousal's low, you can definitely like, you know, you put on some heavy metal or hardcore music or something, your heart's gonna race a little bit more. It definitely will increase your arousal. So you can use music to definitely help. But at times, if you're already really aroused and then you try to get heavy metal music going on, it can be too much. And then you can't focus because the music's too loud, your thoughts are too loud, there's just too much going on. I think the group thing is a great equalizer at times, because sometimes when your confidence is, when you get out from under a bar, you're like, fuck, that felt heavy, and everybody's like, yeah, you fucking smoked that, like 20 more pounds or whatever they're saying to you a lot of and then you go and watch the video, you're like, oh yeah, I'm good. You know, so like I do think the group dynamic can definitely help. And I think what it does is it helps you be accountable, because it's easy when we get up in here and we get scared to not put that PR on when we know we've earned the right to put it, when it should be put on because it's going to slightly challenge us. It's always easy to not really challenge ourselves to the fullest extent of what we should be and convince ourselves that that's the right call and that we are. And that accountability of like other teammates and training partners is really, really important. Sometimes you're just like focusing on the like pure details of the things, right? Can help calm you down. So like for me, when I'm wrapping my wrists, like wrapping it the same way every time, that ritualistic approach to doing things, especially when you do them and you're successful because you're making good decisions all the time and you're doing the right things, can really start to like just build that awareness of being in the moment. So like beforehand, you can be all like, oh fuck, like this is making my heart beat out of my chest, but like you feel the thumb loop, you feel the wrap getting tighter, locking it in, grabbing the other one, like doing the same thing. You can just really focus on each individual task of, you know, then you're chalking your hands. I'll, you know, set my suit, approach the bar in a certain way, feeling it in your hands. Like that helps bring awareness. And you hear about lifters talking about this all the time, like pay attention to each step, right? And that helps bring that awareness in. And it does help lock you in and kind of make you more confident at times. I think too, what you see, you know, in powerlifting, you can get away with having higher arousal. And I think this is what you see with like meets when people are going fucking nuts sometimes. You just can't train that way. So you got to know when to call your shots. Like there's a time at a meet where it might be, hey, a national championship is on the line. You need to hit a deadlift you've never lifted before. Go to a dark place and get fucking mad and get pissed off and literally, you know, dump everything out there because everything's on the line, and you might get higher performance out of those arousal levels. But we're talking more about training and like competing and finding what you need best at given times. You can experiment with stuff in the gym. Like I think there's a time where you should dig down deep, huff a cap in training and really fucking see what you're made of. And this is why I give lifters on week 4, we pull back a little bit. So we only do 3 days. They do some comp lifts at like 80%, doubles, triples. It's pretty light. Because on week 3, a lot of times they'll have 3 max effort lifts that they're trying to PR from 2 weeks previously. So they're really competing hard in that week. And I want them to have that opportunity if it's like, hey, I know I got an easy week. This deadlift feels fucking hard right now, but I'm going to put 5 pounds on week 1 because I've earned the fucking right to put that PR on that bar and see what happens. And so I want them to compete like that at times. Because having that deadlift at the end of a week literally simulates a competition of having the deadlift last, where you might have to pull for something. So there's opportunities that are built into training all of the time for lifters to experiment with these things. And week 1's a really good time when you have to leave 5 to 10 pounds on the bar. You know, a lot of times, so things that'll increase arousal right away: novelty, unpredictability, and complexity, right? So if you're getting a new exercise right in the beginning, it's novel, you don't know what to expect, right? It's already going to increase arousal. So it's an opportunity in week one when you know you're not going to miss something. You shouldn't be. It's very rare people miss something on week one when they're told to leave 5 to 10 pounds on the bar, but it fucking happens, Jess. But it's an opportunity you get that increased arousal from the novelty and the unpredictability of it, and to find your 5. And then when you're doing the technique work and it's 5 by 5 or something like that, your heart rate's going, the short rests, same thing, because your physiology is acting in a way that like really increases nervousness and stuff. It's a good opportunity to find your 5. And then week 3, to stay calm, to believe in yourself, to self-talk. If you've done everything right, when you see that PR that's on those lifts, you just fucking know you can do it when you've done everything right. And yeah, sometimes you miss, but you're like, hey, things went well, I'm gonna learn from this and I'm gonna move on. But it gives you that confidence. You get to learn how to build that confidence over time by doing all the small things. Then all of a sudden you see the big things, you see the PRs, you see the confidence, and it cycles through over and over and over. That's all I have to say on this. Anything else? All right, you can follow me on Instagram. It's KWKNRT and Precision Powerlifting Systems. You can give Jay Birdie a follow at KWKN, at Jay Birdie.